I've always thought that I wouldn't sell like a fitness ebook for a while. And I was like, I'm just going to have to do it. And I went home that evening and wrote it until like 5 a.m.
Wow.
And then called up my graphic designer friend again and was like, we're moving once more. Like, let's do this. And then I started like marketing it properly, using testimonials, all of these things. And I remember like being completely frank. Like, I'm just going to be honest. Halfway through January, I'd made like 80 grand off it. Like,
what?
Like, it was unbelievable.
Hey guys, everyone, welcome. You're here listening to the Caught Off Guard podcast. I'm your host, Patricia, and I am beyond excited today because we have got the one and only Grace Beverly here for an episode. Hello, Grace.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It is so good to see you on here. It's been a while. This has been like a work in progress, but Grace is booked and busy. So we haven't had the chance to connect. Yeah. But I feel like it's so nice because I feel like you're the first social media influencer. And I say that in quotation marks, like it's a bad thing, but it's been an absolutely amazing thing for the both of us. And I'd love to explore that journey with you a little bit more, as well as so many other things. So I'm going to do a little bit of a heads up for those of you who don't know about Grace. Grace has got an amazing background, an amazing story. And how old are you? I can't even remember.
23.
Like 23 years old, and has done just so many amazing things off of the back of social media, but of course, hard work. So Grace is the ultimate boss babe, listed on the Forbes 30 Under 30 and named as NatWest Young Entrepreneur of the Year. How did you get that? That sounds so amazing.
Thank you. So what's weird is that, I think it was about a year ago now that I actually got the Young Entrepreneur of the Year. So I'm sure it expires soon. I'm probably not of the year anymore. But I think that was actually probably one of the first times that I actually thought of myself as kind of like, oh, I guess I am an entrepreneur. Like, I guess you guys are right. Like, which is so crazy because I think it's definitely a female thing as well. And kind of being like, oh, I'm not going to put myself in that position until I feel like I've made it in that.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And the funny thing about being an entrepreneur is then when you've kind of made it, you're no longer an entrepreneur. You're kind of like a CEO, or like that you're not really referred to as an entrepreneur anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think just I kind of didn't necessarily put myself in that position. Then I was like, oh, okay. And then the Forbes 30 Under 30, that was like a huge goal of mine that I cannot tell you how shocked I was. I think I got a message from Forbes in February asking for our financials. So just being like, can we look at your finance sheets, but like to check it out, see all of that, see if the numbers, all of that. So I sent them through. But I remember when they're saying that, because I know that Forbes 30 Under 30 is published in March. So I remember getting that message and being like, I let out a scream. Like, when something comes out of your body and you're like,
for sure,
where was that from? Like, who made that happen? And honestly, and then you don't know until it's published. And I woke up that morning and I literally just, my phone was just like, and it was like all links of people sending, being like, oh my God. And I was literally, that was like a big goal, but like I did not expect that to happen any time soon, if at all.
As soon as it did. But obviously the financials were adding up.
They were.
Like certain other people's. Okay, right, I'm going to keep reading. Sorry, let me not be shady right now. Okay, so Grace is an entrepreneur, social media influencer, and the author of the soon-to-be released Working Hard, Hardly Working, Redefining Productivity in the Modern World. That sounds like a book that I'm going to love because I'm obsessed with productivity. That makes you so happy. She's the founder of 3 businesses: Tala, a sustainable and ethical activewear brand; Shreddy, a goal-setting app that became the #1 fitness app; and BND, a company which sells resistant bands and other workout products. That is really a lot. All of her brands are about helping women feel comfortable in the gym and at home. They are hugely successful, and she ended the year with a combined sales of 7.3 million across all of her 3 companies. And these are brands that she started whilst being a student at university at Oxford. Wow. And she's used social media to build an audience and beyond. So Hello, Grace. It is so amazing to have you on here.
It's so nice to be here.
Yes.
I'm really excited. I feel like we've both come so far since last time we did something together as well.
Exactly.
And I love that. I live for that.
It's so crazy. So how me and Grace, we kind of know each other, but I feel like the YouTube world, especially in the UK, we kind of like DM each other, we will follow each other. And Grace, has been working on so many fitness projects. And I've seen her years ago when you were still at university. So you were combining being I don't even know if I want to say you started off as being a social media influencer. You were just someone who was creating content around fitness because that was something you were interested in.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was definitely something I fell into. It was definitely I didn't even know what influencers were when I started because it was like 5 years ago. And I feel like the only people who were influencers were like actresses and models and all of that. And I didn't watch YouTube. I had no idea about any of it. And so It was definitely something I fell into, which has suited me so well because it's meant that I've been able to mold it to exactly how I want it to be, including now when I don't act as a social media influencer at all. It's kind of like, sorry.
You don't be posting very much. No. Yeah, but sorry, I digress. But yeah, we've met because we were in that space, and we even did a few videos together, or a video together where you were helping me get my glutes, activated because I don't really like exercising or anything like that. Okay, so we have this first section here, which is called an ice shaker. Really quick, off the cuff questions that are meant to make you feel not awkward, but you have to think a little bit about them, and maybe you might not have been asked these questions before. We just want to rattle you just a little bit. So, would you ever delete your Grace Beverly social media account, or have you ever thought about doing that?
I would definitely never say never when it comes to that. I think that I've scaled down so much even over the past year that it's just, it's not a central part of my life. And I feel like I don't use social media that much, or I kind of use it as like a person, like anyone would use it. So I definitely consider it.
Do you think people need a social media account to succeed? And do you think it's possible to achieve what you've achieved without social media?
So I feel like there's a huge acceleration factor with social media. I mean, it's a form of marketing. So in the same way as if you were like insane at ads or whatever it might be, it's an acceleration. And it's obviously hugely done so much for me. But that being said, now that I've spent a lot of time learning kind of the back end of everything, I mean, people do incredible things the whole time with only using kind of paid spend on social media or influence marketing that's nothing to do with themselves. And I feel like now I know that. I mean, if I started up another business now, I'd do it in a completely different way because I wouldn't do it off the back of my own influence. So I definitely it's so possible and people do it the whole time, but there was a huge acceleration factor in the way that I was able to have that audience there, even if they weren't necessarily converted to being customers. There's that kind of hype around it. The algorithm works in your favor. There are various different things that are definitely going to push you out there. So, I mean, there's a reason why it's a great idea to start a business as an influencer.
For sure. What's the biggest misconception you think people have about you?
I think the more I've moved away from posting on social media, I think the more people think that I've got, I don't know, maybe it could come across this way because I'm not sharing vulnerabilities and stuff. But I did a post the other day when I was kind of there is a huge correlation between women being more successful and being asked to be more vulnerable and then being asked to show their emotions. And it's because of this kind of negative correlation between being successful and being likable as a woman. And it's you have to have a story behind you that makes you really humble, or that makes you oh no, downplay my success, all of this. And so I think the more that I don't show that, the more people are oh, she must be sitting there I am amazing, I do this, and I'm obviously I'll still be the exact same person behind the scenes. I'm still, I've still got my insecurities, I've still got my vulnerabilities, but I don't share them anymore. And therefore, or sometimes I do, but because I don't use social media like that, it's not my first thought. I'll only share when I'm in the mood to share. And so I think that one of the misconceptions that's come out of that is that, I mean, I think change is a good thing. I think saying people have changed is a bad thing is a very immature mindset. That's another question for another time. But I actually do think that people probably think that I've changed way more than I actually have, just because I'm not sharing the same vulnerabilities that I would when I was on YouTube or whatever it might be. And people love to see successful women as either a bitch or like, and very like, ugh, or like the other side of it, which is like, oh, but she's got this like sob story behind her, and then there's this, and then there's that, and she's really humble and she plays it down. And it's like, women should just be able to be successful without having to reassure people like, oh no, I'm still human, and like my success really isn't that great, and like all of that. And so I feel like it's definitely, I think the more unapologetic I've been about that, the more people have been like, oh God, she seems more horrible than she used to be. It's like,
so they've categorized you in the bitch category, basically.
Essentially.
But what you're trying to say is that you're not.
No, and
That's
also
a misconception.
And I think it's like, I think when we look at the way we see women in like a successful woman, I have to address that with myself too. There are so many people who I see as successful and I'm like, oh, but apparently they're like quite hard to work with, and apparently like, you know, they're really, really hard cutting. And it's like, imagine if you would never say that about a successful man. You just say like, oh, he knows what he's doing, or he's like, whatever. Sure. And so it's like, I feel like I've had to address my own preconceptions with that too. And I definitely see that applied to me from other people.
Ooh, oh my gosh, we're loving it. We're going to talk about this in detail, but this is still the ice shaker. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
What was it actually like going to Oxford University? And what are some of the things that no one prepares you for?
So it was daunting, and I think no one prepares you for things like the imposter syndrome. I think everyone who's there doesn't think they deserve to be there because they think there's like some ultra high genius that they're not, that everyone should be. And I mean, the workload was just insane. So that's definitely one of those things. But for me, I mean, I never wanted to give them an excuse to say like, you need to stop doing what you're doing elsewhere. So maybe I took that a bit more to heart. But yeah, and it's the first time you're thrown in the deep end as an adult, being like, make new friends, and like then decide to live with them within 2 weeks for next year. Otherwise, all the leases are gone.
Gosh.
So there are challenges.
Crazy.
But I loved it. I loved it, and I wouldn't have changed it for the world.
Amazing. What are your thoughts on cancel or call out culture on social media? And have you experienced it yourself?
I think there's a real importance for accountability. I think that some areas of cancel culture need to be worked on because they don't allow anyone, including like me, I found before, you hear something, you take it at face value, you don't look into it, you cancel whoever it is or whatever brand it is or whatever. And it's really hard to get around. And I think that I've definitely, now that I'm seen as more like a brand and like all of these things, I very much try to avoid doing that to other brands, because like, as in, it's kind of like you don't necessarily know. Apart from, I think there's a very clear line when it comes to racism, homophobia, sexism, like basically just there are some clear lines. And then there are some things that I think people love, like mob movement, and they love kind of everyone in, I've got the facts and all of that. I think there are some things that definitely need to be cancelled and that I think that need to be kind of held up, but I think there's a way we need to address taking things at face value. And there have been a few times where I've kind of started a conversation on my story being like, so this happened this week, controversially, what do you think about, like, if you think about it like this? And people have been like, I never thought about it that way. And it's like, that's the danger, because I wouldn't either until I really sat there and was like, like, let me look into this more, or let me consider this. So yeah, pros and cons.
I've also noticed with cancel culture is that it doesn't stick. Like, I've actually seen certain people or certain things be cancelled and they blow up even more afterwards. So I feel like actually cancelling can be a strategy that some people use.
I mean, like, some people certainly use it as
100%.
I think less so people than brands. I think certain brands definitely use it as a all publicity is good publicity thing.
Yeah.
Whereas people, you can use that, but it's going to, unless you're some like superhuman, it's going to be detrimental to your mental health. And so it's like, is that really a cost you want to pay? Like for me, I'd rather have no followers and no one yelling at me. But like, no, that's not completely true. But
you're
like,
a sensitive soul.
It's more just like, I really don't want your opinion on my life.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Okay, well, I feel like we've shaken the ice just a little bit there. And I do have a bit of a structure in the format, but I feel like I just want to talk off the cuff. And obviously the break is all about giving people information around finances, business, providing, having some of these conversations that I feel like a lot of people don't like to have. And I feel like privately, we had so many conversations, like straight off the back. I think we talked about money straight away. I feel like, there were times where you were like, showed me certain dashboards and all that kind of stuff. I was like, wow, this is great. This is my kind of conversation. But I think that what people would really want to know about maybe the business side of how you started off as an influencer, and how did you monetize in the beginning before you even really knew about what the options were?
So I think when I say I like fell into it, like we'll move past the like initial how it grew essentially just because I was sharing content that I wanted to share. And then it wasn't just like, oh, and then people would kind of come flooding in. It was more then I would take learnings from that. So I'd look at it and say, okay, people liked this more, or they liked this less, or whatever. And then I just replicate that. And essentially, that's how it grows. And then you change with the trends. And then I think, so when I was in when I was working at IBM, so I worked at IBM for a year before I went to uni just to earn some money, get some corporate experience. When I was there, I was putting loads of recipes up on Instagram, and they were essentially like, I love eating shit, but I was trying to be like fitness. So I'd make healthy versions of unhealthy recipes. And then people loved them so much, and people were asking me to share them the whole time. And I was like, which I would love doing. And then after a bit, I was like, I have a full-time job. Like I'm leaving the office super late. Yeah. I'm leaving my house at 5, 6 a.m. So like, like something's going to have to give here. And so basically what I decided to do was, I literally threw together, I talked about this the other day on my Instagram story. I contacted my graphic designer student friend, and I was like, hey, would you be able to mock something up for me? Basically the idea is that I want to put all my recipes I want to have a sweet ebook and a savory ebook, and I want to call it like Eat My Instagram, and I just want to have like the recipe stuff in the book.
Wanted to call it Eat My Instagram.
Yeah, so that
right,
was
okay.
Back in
this is back in the day.
Yeah. This was like 5 years ago. And so like basically collated it all together, literally did it within like less than a week. And the longest part was just like the graphic design stuff. She was just like a student friend of mine, and we were like, great. We just sat around. I like got her dinner every night and paid her a bit of money. And then, we made this, sold it, and it kind of made a few £100s. I was like, great. Like that's a fantastic amount of extra pocket money for me. And then I think a year later, I didn't do that. I didn't like push it at all. I was more like, if I'm going to be putting this together, I do need some sort of like remuneration for it, which I think people need to have that mindset a bit more. And then in my first year at uni, I remember it was kind of Black Friday, and I'd kind of forgotten, like I was not a businesswoman by any means at this stage. And I'd kind of forgotten I'd even released those. And then it came to Black Friday, and I was like, I should do a Black Friday sale on them. And I remember like I just like built the Shopify site, just like downloaded like a digital downloads thing that meant that like everyone who purchased this like download just meant that they got it to the, like it was all very simple, and just like shoved nice colors on it and was like, yay. So I put a sale on for that Black Friday weekend. And I remember, just because I'd said it was a sale, I remember making like 3-4 grand on it. And I was like,
and that was off the back of not knowing, just the plan, doing something just valuable for people. Yeah,
exactly.
So
and valuable for me as well, and existing content too. I didn't retake any photos. I literally didn't have the time. Then about a month later, I had a problem with student finance, and I was just getting tuition fees. I was paying for my maintenance off the back of what I'd earned working at IBM, and then obviously extra stuff here and there. Like at the time, I was only getting paid like 50 quid for a post or like something. It was like when you were really having to convince brands to even send you anything. I was meant to be getting my tuition fees from student finance, and there was a problem with it. So it was in my Christmas holidays after my first term at Oxford, obviously like really trying to work really hard, like prove that, I'm good.
You're meant
like
to
all
be
of that.
there.
Yeah. And then I got an email being like, you like officially are on like the suspension notice for Oxford University because you haven't paid your tuition fees. And like,
oh my gosh.
And I was like, oh my God. So I sent like frantic emails to like the bursar, to like all of these people. And I was like, I don't know what's happened. I've signed up to student finance. Like I wasn't going to pay it myself. Like, and they're like, okay, that's good to know. Well, now we know that, we can keep an eye on it a bit more. And they were like, I was in a really nice college. They were lovely. Like this year, for example, with all the COVID stuff and all the awful things about the results and the state school results, they basically just said like, look, if you've been disadvantaged by this, we're letting you in anyway, whether it's this year or next year. Like they were really they're a great college. And and they were like, it's fine, but you really do need to pay them. And I was like, okay, well, like I'll call student finance because I've not got 9 grand lying around, and my parents don't pay for uni. And so I was like freaked out. And I remember it's obviously so fortunate that happened, because I literally thought I was out to dinner with some like Instagrammy people. And I was like, I've always thought that I wouldn't sell like a fitness ebook for a while. And I was like, I'm just going to have to do it. And I went home that evening and wrote it until like 5 a.m.
Wow.
And then called up my graphic designer friend again and was like, we're moving once more. Like, let's do this. And then put that up for sale just after Christmas with like the January hype, and basically said I'd only put it on for sale for a few days, even though it was an ebook. And I sold like 1,000 of them or something. And so like that was like 3.5 grand or something. Like it was significant. I was like, holy fuck. And so I was like, okay, this is not all the way there, but I'm just going to keep pushing that, all of that. And then I started like marketing it properly. I talked to like some people who I knew who had experience with these things, and like was just using testimonials, all of these things. And I remember like being completely frank, like I'm just going to be honest, halfway through January, I'd made like 80 grand off it. Like,
what?
Like it was unbelievable. And I was literally sitting there. I was like,
what do I do with all this money, and how did this happen?
Like,
what? That's also
sorry, I didn't, when I said that I sold 1,000, they were 30. I literally just realized my math. I didn't make 3.5 grand. That's what I made in Black Friday. It was like 35 grand at that point.
Wow.
And I was honestly like, I have because I've never seen that, like, and I honestly have never seen that money. Never thought I would see that money just like sitting there.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck? And then basically, obviously then then student finance came through like a few days before I was even like, is it wise? Because I've always been of the opinion that you're meant to get a student loan anyway, because it's basically free money, and then you only ever pay it back for a certain amount of years and only after a certain amount of time. So I was like, okay, great, like, fine. And so that went in, and then I just like had this money that I wouldn't have started if not, and basically just decided to look at other avenues, look at what I could do with it, set up an Instagram page for that specific product.
Yeah.
Took people on board and basically just started being like, right, I guess this is what I do then. And then people loved it. So when that 8 weeks was up, I wrote another one, like just various different things, paid like experts to be able to approve things, like I just wanted to make it really good, and I wanted to make it a good product. And I think that we all have this sort of mindset where it's like, oh my God, like that money, I'm like, people have paid me this, like this has to be the best it could ever be. And like, I need to reply to everything. I need to do this, I need to do that. And I was like stressed out my mind, because then I also, was going back to exams. Anyway, fast forward, I decided to do physical products in November of 2017.
Of that same year where you had the accidental...
So it was technically the next year. Yeah, I was like talking to manufacturing partners, and I remember I was using resistance bands at the time, these fabric resistance bands, but I never knew about them until my PT friend had been like, oh, you've got to use these. Bodybuilders use them the whole time to grow their glutes. And I was like, like, how have I never heard of these? I've only heard of like the shitty rubber ones, like, and then started using them. I was like, this is amazing. And then I looked online, they were like £40, and I was like, that's a lot, like, as in that's a lot. So we started looking at manufacturing of it. Turns out that was just the going rate, and so they'd been hugely inflated because they were such a specialist product for a specialist niche market. And I was like, fuck that, like girls want to grow their bums, so like I'm gonna make them and I'm gonna sell them for £14, and I'm gonna write a free booty guide to go with them. And so that basically, and that was so feasible. I mean, it wasn't a margin. If I was doing it now, I would have made the margins higher, because you understand that obviously what comes into that margin, it's not just profit, it's marketing, it's staff, it's office, it's all
everything
of those
else, of course.
But like that made sense to me at the time. I had very few like sunk costs, very few like marginal costs, even apart from the actual like CPU of the product. And so I was like, great, cool, let's do it. Sold like, put 200 of them or something up for sale. They sold within like milliseconds, to the point that the website glitched and we sold like 10 times the amount that we had. We had to call the factory, get them to work, and like overdrive, ship them all over, and fulfill the rest as pre-orders. And then kind of like the rest has been just like history. It's just been about adding products. It's been about building teams, and it's been about me realizing like, oh, it's a full-blown business. And then once getting to grips with that, that side of the business took a backseat, because I was like, okay, this is more the merch side. And then I started really concentrating on my new concept brand, which was Tala. But hold
on, I need to summarize this.
Right?
We're getting into everything really fast. But in summary, what you've just said to me is that out of need because you needed to pay your student finance because the loan hadn't dropped and hit the account as expected, you realized that you had an opportunity. Actually, I don't even know if you realized you had an opportunity.
No,
you just had necessity.
Myself that much credit.
Yeah, you had necessity and you accidentally dropped on an 80 grand deal or an 80 grand situation. You put something together. You didn't even overthink the process. You just had need. And then that was the result of it. And I think you've been able to build off the back of that. And I think there are so many people in similar situations that they have needs and that, you know, it might be a bill to pay. It might be a school fee to pay or something like that. And they just need to kind of almost this is the definition of being entrepreneurial. It's like, what can I do? What can I scrub together?
Honestly,
and then take action and do.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I wouldn't give myself as much credit as saying like some of them were conscious. Like it was more just like, I could do this, I could do this. I've sold so much shit. I realized how much shit I've sold that like has never made it to like the now version of the brands. And it's not as in, I don't mean it's like shit that was sold, but it's kind of like avenues that I haven't then taken or like whatever. And it's just about being like, okay, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this.
Yeah.
And finding out what works for me.
For sure.
And for me, it was great to have the time that I was at uni where I didn't need to like take a leap, quit a job, like make a decision. It was more about finding those avenues and then creating this concept that I actually wanted to do essentially like a full blown brand.
Love it. But the thing is, you were doing it while being at uni. You were multitasking and doing what you had to do while doing something else. You had responsibilities. And I think there's this idea that people are like, I've got to quit my job or I've got to stop doing what I'm doing or I've got to drop out of university. But I think it's really important for people to understand that like not everybody has the luxury to do that necessarily, and that you can kind of, they call it bootstrapping. You bootstrapped, you came up with an idea, you did it on the fly, and it paid off. Doesn't always pay off, but in your situation, it did. Now, how did you balance being at uni as well as building all these brands?
Yeah, so small plug, I talk about this a lot in my book, but essentially I'm very, very like on it in terms of the way I plan things and the way I deal with everything. And like for me,
I think
I'm just like everyththing. Like I have like a methodology for like everything I do, and it's like a language to me. But for me, it was all like at school, for example, like I always, because I did music, like it was always like, you know, I'd come in at 7 and then school would start at like 9 or whatever it would be. Like I'd always have things around that. And like, I think actually going to a uni where I had so much work was really helpful, because if I went somewhere where I had an essay a term rather than one every 2 days, then like, I think it would have been a lot harder to make that kind of schedule. Whereas I worked it as a job anyway. I'd just come from a job, like I'd just come from my internship. And so I kind of arrived and I was like, this is the way I do things. Like I'm just going to work it as a job. I'll be in the library in working hours and I'll make it happen. And then obviously you can fit everything else into that. Whereas if I was waking up at 11 every day and doing like the very studenty lifestyle, which like in part, at some point that would have been great. I'm sure I would have loved that. But for me, I didn't even have that opportunity whether I was doing the business or not. So I think actually it really helped me that I was in a high pressure, like high moving environment, because you know, there wasn't as much of that. I'm missing out. I'm doing this. I'm doing like whatever. It was very just like, well, you're going to be working hard anyway, so you might as well be making some money, and fitting other things in there as well.
So I love this. I actually think like hard work makes people better. And I feel like from my personal experience, like one of my hardest jobs was when I worked as a consultant for Deloitte, right? And the ish that they made us do, how hard we had to work. We were in at 7, we'd be eating dinner at the table, we'll be seeing client, you know, you'll give a director a deck at 7 p.m. and they'd like scrub it out and say, it's not good enough. And then you'd go back and you'll work till 9 p.m. It kind of, I feel like I learned the most because I was in that environment that pushed me to work
100%.
really hard. And I'm presuming that at university, like the uni you were at made you learn how to like just do what you had to do. Because I think no one can get anywhere without hard work. If you think it's just because you're lying back, you know, you're at home taking a cute Instagram, you know, picture, looking relaxed, but I know behind the scenes, it's a bit more than that. Yeah. So how do you plan 100%. Your day? Because, and actually, obviously, you're doing a book around productivity. So share a little bit more about your perspective on that. Yeah.
So as I said, I'm very rigid about it, essentially. And I've got I've got a way of looking at it that's very specific, and I essentially make myself a routine no matter what I'm doing based on a number of kind of like habits, and so that no matter how much my days are changing around, I'm able to like know how I deal with things. And so at the moment, for example, my diary is absolutely madness because I'm still finishing the manuscript of the book. So on Mondays and Fridays, I work the equivalent to a whole work week combined for the businesses through that, plus about 2 to 3 hours on the end of every work day for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that adds up to kind of like a 40-hour week just from those. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the day, I'm writing. And that is time blocked out. And I time block everything.
Oh my gosh, you're speaking my language. Oh, I'm getting excited. Block everything. Yeah. Yes, I love it.
And I think that that's especially important, and was especially important for me when I was like doing uni, which was it was very academic. All of the stuff I was doing was kind of essay based and research based. And then doing the business and the creative stuff, you're in a completely different mindset. So there's no point you doing one thing, then the other thing, then the other thing. Put yourself, like, batch your tasks together and how you're going to do them for that, like how your mindset is for each one of them, and make that happen. And things like, I have really strict rules. Now obviously I have an amazing team to enable me to do all the rest of the stuff I'm doing, which essentially means that I don't go on my emails. I get one or two approval emails a day to go through everything. But at the time, for example, I'd only check my emails like at set points during the day, dependent on what it was. So when it was my internship,
disciplined enough to do it.
Yeah. Like, because otherwise you just don't get your work done, and like you'll think you're ticking boxes, but actually you're procrastinating by doing admin. Like you're not actually making progress. And so for me, even if it was like at IBM, for example, like you'd have the instant messaging, that the service that they had, but then emails, I'd check them maximum once an hour, and that was because I was an intern, so I had to be on, like, as in I had to be on my emails. That was a huge part of my job. I couldn't just be like, sorry sir, like I'm only checking them 2 times a day. Like sorry, someone does that for me. No, that wouldn't have gone that well. But for example, even in the uni day, like it would be maximum twice, and then I'd work around that, because otherwise you use it as a real form of procrastination.
This is so
and it's the same with it's the same with like any communication, phones, anything. My ethos is, if you're working, you might as well be working. Otherwise, you could be doing something else. So like, just like I'm very, because
Grace is telling me off right now. I feel if you're working, you better be working. Oh my gosh, the truth has been spoken. No, but this is so true. There's a book called Make Time, and these guys they worked at Google, and they actually were part of making email and also like bouncing emails or whatever, stuff like this. And they literally talk about the fact that these systems are put in place to distract you. They actually want you to be on platforms as long as possible. That's how they make their money, right?
We're surrounded by it's so funny, because obviously I've been so in this because I've been writing about it, and it's like everything on the internet. You know how they say that if anything's free, then you're the product. So essentially, for example, like any social media, if you're not paying for it, you are paying for it somehow. Otherwise, there will be no means for you to use it. So you're paying for it with your time, and therefore with the eyes you're putting on ads, therefore with the amount of like traffic you're giving them, whatever it might be. These are designed to distract you. And there was a really interesting, I don't know if you've read Trick Mirror.
No, I haven't.
It's by someone called Gia Tolentino, and she's like unbelievable, like the smartest essays on like modern time that I've like, just unbelievable. And there was this one like passage where she essentially talks about us on social media. We do the same thing as, the lab rat experiment, where like there is, where there's like water, and if it comes out at like regular times, then they like don't tap it, they don't go on it, they go to like do whatever they're doing regularly. And if it comes out at like random times, they're constantly like tapping the water thing, like trying to get it out. And that's like us with social media. Like, we're scrolling, we're not getting any joy out of it, and then there'll be suddenly, just for the like an inkling that someone will give us that like, ah, haha, or like, oh yeah, that's motivated me, or whatever it might be. It's like we have that like lab rat behavior.
For sure.
We're like constantly just trying to get that stimulated, like whatever it might be. And then as soon as I kind of just like thought about it more, like, don't get me wrong, I'm like, my screen time is embarrassing still. Like, there was all like various different things. But when I'm working, I'm working. And like, I'm going to do good work. Otherwise, I might as well be with my friends, or like doing something I love elsewhere.